Hello and welcome to today's edition of Daf Yomi. Today's tractate is Menachot Daf 66 Omer. So just finish off from the last Daf. Rabbi Shimon ben Bateva says that proof is not necessary, as the verse states, 7 weeks shall you number for you. From the time the sickle is first put to the standing grain, you shall begin to number 7 weeks. Deuteronomy 16:9. By using the term for you, the verse indicates that the counting of the weeks is dependent upon the decision of the court, as they know how to calculate the new month. This serves to exclude the possibility that the counting starts after the Shabbat of creation, when counting can be performed by every person, not only the court. Rabbi Yossi says that the verse, and you shall count for you from the morrow after the day of rest, Shabbat, in Leviticus 23:15, means from the morrow after the festival of Passover. Do you say it means from the morrow after the festival of Passover, or is it only referring to the morrow after the Shabbat of creation, i.e. Sunday? You can say in response, it is stated from the morrow after the day of rest, Shabbat, that is during Passover. No, it is stated only from the morrow of the day of rest, Shabbat. Considering that the entire year is full of Shabbatot, go and try and examine to which Shabbat the verse is referring. How does one know which Shabbat this means? Clearly then, the day of rest is the festival, not Shabbat. Rabbi Yossi cites another proof, and furthermore it is stated Shabbat below with regard to the festival of Shavuot, Leviticus 23:16, and it is also stated Shabbat above, Leviticus 23:15, with regard to the starting of the counting of the Omer. Just as below, with regard to the festival of Shavuot, it is stated, even until the morrow after the 7th week Shabbat, you shall number 50 days. And the word Shabbat is referring to a time at the beginning of the festival. So to here, with regard to the beginning of the Omer, the word Shabbat means festival. And the counting starts nearing the beginning of the festival on the second day of Passover. According to the Bethusians, sometimes the commencement of the counting is well after the start of Passover. The Gemara continues. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says that there is yet another proof. One verse states, 6 days shall you eat unleavened bread, Deuteronomy 16:8. And one verse states, 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, Exodus 12:15. How can these texts be reconciled? Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar explains that there is matzah that you are unable to eat for all 7 days of Passover, due to the prohibition of harvesting and eating from the new crop of grain that ripened before Passover until the Omer Offering. But you are able to eat that same matzah for 6 days, although it is from the new crop, as is permitted after bringing the Omer Offering on the second day of Passover. The resolution of the verses is possible only if the Omer Offering is brought on the 16th of Nisan, not on any other date. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar clarifies another 2 verses that deal with the counting of the Omer. And you shall count for you from the morrow after the day of rest, from the day that you bought the sheaf, the Omer of the waving. 7 weeks there shall be complete, even until the morrow after the 7th week you shall number 50 days. And you shall present a new meal offering to the Lord, in Leviticus 23:15-16. One might have thought that although one must harvest and bring the Omer meal offering on the second day of Passover, 16th of Nisan, he may start to count the Omer from whenever he wishes after that day. A Masai Yirtze Yispor. According to his interpretation, the obligation to count would not start specifically on the 16th of Nisan, the day on which the Omer offering was sacrificed. Rather, the verse would mean that from that day onward, one may begin fulfilling the mitzvah of counting the Omer whenever he chooses, says Rashi. Therefore, the verse states, 7 weeks shall you number for you. From the time the sickle is first put to the standing grain, you shall begin to count number 7 weeks. Deuteronomy 16:9. This verse indicates that the counting should commence upon the reaping of the grain for the Omer offering. If one would read just this verse, from the time the sickle is first put to the standing grain, you shall begin to number, one might have thought that one can harvest and count and then bring the Omer offering whenever he wishes. Therefore, the verse states, from the day that you bought the sheaf of the waving, you shall number 50 days, indicating that the counting should start on the day the Omer offering is brought. If one would derive the halacha from this verse from the day that you bought the sheaf of the waving, one might have thought that he should harvest and count and bring the Omer offering during the day, not on the night of the 16th of Nisan. Therefore, the verse states, from the day that you bought the sheaf of the waving, 7 weeks there shall be complete. When do you find that there are 7 complete weeks? You find it at a time when you begin to count from the evening. Only if the counting commences at night at the start of the 16th of Nisan will the 7 weeks of counting be complete without missing that first evening. If so, one might have thought that all of the rite of the Omer should be at night, and therefore one should harvest and bring the Omer offering and start to count at night. Therefore the verse states, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the waving. How can these texts be reconciled? Does one start at night or in the day? Harvesting was the friend as a man katsiras ha-Omer. One might harvest the Omer crop at any point throughout the entire night. If one harvested it during the daytime, it is valid. The halacha is according to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Rambam Sefer Voda, Menachot Daf 7:7, and counting should be performed at night, and the bringing the Omer offering is during the day. The Gemara has presented 2 braytot with 10 proofs between them, countering the Bethudian claim that the counting of the Omer begins on the Sunday after Passover. Rabbi said, for all the suggested proofs, there is a possible refutation except for those of the last 2 Tanaim cited, both in the first braytot and in the second braytot, which there is no refutation. Rava elaborates, if one seeks to prove from that which Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai said that there is a contradiction between the 2 verses, as one indicates that there is an obligation to count 50 days and another that the obligation is to count 7 weeks, perhaps this contradiction can be resolved in accordance with the statement of Abaye. As Abaye said, it is a mitzvah to count days, and it is also a mitzvah to count 7 weeks. When one counts, he should track both the number of days and the number of weeks. Rabbi Elazar derived that the counting is dependent upon the court, not the individual. Therefore, he claimed that when the verse mentions Shabbat, it must be referring to the festival, not a regular Shabbat, which does not require a court for its determination. Rabbi Yeshua derived that just as the counting and sacrificing of the new moon is performed at the same time, so too the counting of the Omer and the start of Shavuot that follows must occur on a specific day. Rabbi refutes both of these claims. If the proof is from that which Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua said, granted that the proof successfully demonstrated that the counting should start after the festival, not after Shabbat, but from where does one know that it is referring to the first day of the festival? Perhaps it is referring to the last day of the festival, i.e. the 7th day of Passover. Rabbi now addresses the statements of the final 2 that the name cited in the 5th braytot. With regard to the proof given by Rabbi Shimon from the 2 loaves that are brought at the beginning of a festival, and the proof mentioned by Rabbi Yehuda ben Beteva from the usage of the word Shabbat in connection with Shavuot, Rabbi said they have no refutation. Continuing with the proofs of the Tanaim from the second braytot, Rabbi said, if one seeks to prove the Bethudian claim from that which Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Yehuda, said that if the counting starts from Shabbat, then Shavuot can occur anywhere from 50 to 56 days from the date of the counting that has started the previous year. I would say that perhaps the verse means 50 days excluding these 6 extra days. Rabbi continues, if one seeks to prove from that which Rabbi Yehuda ben Beteva said in the second braytot, that the verse indicates that the counting is dependent upon the decision of the court, not the individual, this too can be refuted. From where does one know that it is referring to the first day of the festival? How is it referring to the last day of the festival, the 7th day of Passover? Well, concludes the first proof cited by Rabbi Yossi was that if the counting starts the day after a regular Shabbat, then it would be impossible to determine which Shabbat is meant. Rabbi Yossi himself saw that it is also subject to refutation. What's the footnote? Rabbi Yossi Nami Chazei Lei Pilcha. Since Rabbi does not explain his refutation, as he did with the other proofs that he rejected, the latter commentators attempt to fill in this gap. Some claim that it can be assumed that the verses serve to clarify an issue rather than obfuscate, and therefore one may conclude from the context that the Shabbat mentioned in the verse is the first one that follows the first festival day of Passover, and that's from the Hashech Shlomo Si or Chadushay Batra. And this is why Rabbi Yossi continued and said, furthermore, and suggested a second proof. As Rabbi declared, the last 2 proofs cited in the second braytot, the second proof provided by Rabbi Yossi and the proof of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, standing without refutation. The Gemara analyzes the matter itself of Rabbi's statement cited in the course of the previous discussion. Rabbi said it is a mitzvah to count days, and it's also a mitzvah to count weeks. Mitzvah lemane yoma mitzvah lemane shavuot is a mitzvah by Torah to count 7 complete weeks, starting from the day Omer offering is brought. As it states, 7 weeks you shall number for you. From the time the sickle is first put to the standing grain, you should begin to number 7 weeks, Deuteronomy 16:9. It's also meant to count the days. According to the verse, you shall number 50 days, Leviticus 23:16. On the first day, and it says today is the first day of the Omer, and on the second day, today is the second day of the Omer. One continues to count in this manner for 7 days. On the 7th day, one recites today 7 days, which is 1 week of the Omer. On the 8th day, one counts today's 8 days, which is 1 week and 1 day of the Omer. According to the Ramah, the proper formulation of the last word of this formula is Ba'omer, of the Omer. According to the Ran, the Ari, and most halakha authorities, the proper formulation is La'omer, to the Omer. See the Mishnah Berurah in the Shari Teshuvah. The Rambam maintains that this mitzvah applies by Torah law even though there's a temple and Omer offering. Most halakha authorities disagree and maintain that the mitzvah nowadays applies by rabbinic law. Therefore, if one counts only the days without counting the weeks, he still fulfills the obligation that the Rambam Sefer voted. Hilchot Tamidei Musafin 722, Shochet Orach Chaim 489:1, and see the Mishnah Berurah there. Go to the other footnote. Mitzvah Mimane Yomei or Mitzvah Mimane Shavuot. So many commentators maintain that these two units of counting are part of the same mitzvah to the Rambam. Others claim that the counting of each unit is a separate obligation, which means that there are two mitzvot here: a mitzvah to count the days, and a mitzvah to count the weeks. And the Rabbeinu Yeruham. According to his opinion, during the temple period, they recite two separate blessings for the two different mitzvot. The Gemara knows that in fact the sages of the study hall of Rashi counted days, and they also counted weeks. Amaima, who's that? Amaima was one of the great sages of the 5th and 6th generation of Babylonian Amoraim. Amaima was born and raised in the Haldea, where he learned and taught Torah, although it is likely that he also studied with the sages of Pudita. The statements he quotes are mainly from 5th generation Amoraim, students of Rabbi and Rabbah. Apparently, he served as a rabbi and a religious leader in Nahadea, where he established various rabbinic regulations, and he also wielded influence in many other places, including Mahoza. The leaders of the following generation, including Rav Ashi, were his disciples. He had a son named Ma, who studied with Rav Ashi in Ameima's lifetime. Counted days but not weeks. In explanation of his practice, Amaima said, since there is no longer an Omer offering, the counting is performed only in commemoration of the temple. The early commentators explain why the counting of the weeks of the Omer applies by Torah law only when the temple is standing. The verse states, 7 weeks shall you number for you. From the time the sickle is first pointed to the standing grave, you shall begin to number 7 weeks, Deuteronomy 16:9. This indicates that the mitzvah to count the weeks is enforced only when the Omer offering is actually harvested and sacrificed. By contrast, the mitzvah to count the days remains in effect by Torah law even nowadays. Therefore, Amaima was careful to count the days, but not the weeks, and that's from the Ramah ben Yeruham. Therefore, one does not need to be so scrupulous to count both days and weeks. The Mishnah. After they harvested the Omer, after harvesting 3 seah of barley for the Omer offering, they would place the barley into baskets and bring it to the temple courtyard, where it would be beaten, winnowed, and selected. Next, the barley would be singed in a special hollow vessel that allowed the fire to take hold of all barley grains. After that, they would spread out the kernels in the courtyard, where the wind would cool them. Then the kernels were placed in handmills and ground, after which the 3 select seah were separated and sifted through 13 sifters. The rest of the barley was redeemed and permitted for anyone to eat. The mitzvah of challah applies to this remainder of barley, but the obligation of tithes does not. The halacha is according to the opinion of the first Tana and the Rabbi Rambam Sefer Vod, Hilchot Tamidei Musafin 7:12, and placed it in the baskets, and they brought it to the temple courtyard. Hevi'uhu la'azara. All of these actions were performed in the temple courtyard. In accordance with the verse, you shall bring the sheaf of the first of your harvest to the priest, Leviticus 22:10. This indicates that after the harvest, it should be brought to the priests in the courtyard, and all the subsequent stages of the process, such as beating and winnowing and parching, must be performed, and that's Nikirat Sefer. And they would singe it in the fire, the kernels of barley, while they were still on the stalks, in order for the mitzvah of parched grain, as it is written, and if you bring a meal offering of the first fruits